Hello and welcome to another stream. So today we're going to be doing a build guide and it's going to be Intel and AMD, and I'll warn you right now that this is not going to be cheap or even close to being cheap. It's not even the highest of ends, but it's still pretty expensive. So we're going to just get right into it. So I've got all the links going to be in the description down below as well, where you can purchase it. At the moment someone's trying to find the decent prices for me, so all the links have been in this description, so you can click on it if you need to purchase anything really quickly, whatever. We get a small kickback from that, so that's all good. And then yeah, it will take you right directly there and it all makes sense. But this is a kind of near enough a balanced PC, and it will be very good for the airflow. Well, it will be decent enough for the airflow, and yeah, everything. If you go to purchase this actual computer itself, then obviously it will make sense because you can build it to the specification from my list. But it's going to be Intel and AMD, and we're not doing anything like nothing really cheap. And yeah, it's going to be good. This is going to be more for the content creator because obviously RTX 3090. So this would be obviously for content creators and also a bit of gaming and streaming and stuff like that. Right. Hello, Davezda. What a name. Right, so let's get on with it. I've got my little list here and I'm going to just switch over to, I think, this one. Can we do that? Yeah, we can do that. Right, so first off, I'm going to explain a little bit of detail on each one as well, because it does make sense. And also, if you're new to the channel, subscribe, like, and share this content. Actually, you don't need to share it really. Just like, share, like, comment, and also, what else? If you're subscribed, stick the notification bell on, and then you obviously won't miss a thing when I go live. So that makes sense. And I go live every day with computer stuff, or sometimes twice a day. Depends. So we're going to start off with the Define 7 XL full tower black light tint tempered glass case. Now, a reason I went for this case is because this case is quite a big case. And if you think about it, the RTX 3090 is a very chunky graphics card. You can have a vertical orientation, you can have a normal standard orientation mount or a vertical orientation mount. And it's pretty good. It'll probably be smashed up against the glass, depending, because the graphics card is quite thick. So I wouldn't suggest doing it that way. I would suggest doing it in a horizontal orientation, normal, traditional way. It's got massive fans in there for good air cooling, and it doesn't have like the best air cooling from the front, but it has it from the sides, and there are 140mm fans that go in there as well. And it also has at the top you can change. Well, you can change the grill and stuff at the top. You can have it as a filter or not a filter, but obviously everything we're choosing is going to make sense to have the filter on top, depending on where you're working. But as this is going to be for content creation, I guess it's going to be mostly in a clearer environment or cleaner environment. And plus you can go with extended ATX motherboards. I also went with a normal motherboard that's average, so not too much on the overclocking side and stuff like that, because mostly content creators, I don't think they're going to be overclocking, just in case they actually crash their computer. So let's move on. So this is what I would choose for the Intel and AMD setup. So I'll also choose this AIO cooler because it's got a temperature reading on there as well. When you're rendering, the CPU, I think it's when you're rendering, or the other one where you got rendering. I can't remember what the other one is. One graphics card's doing its CUDA cores, so it's rendering, and the CPU management does something as well. But the CPU gets really hot, so this will be good if you're working for a client and stuff like that. You want to make sure that nothing's happening, the computer's not overheating, and everything's going to be like done on time. Then obviously it's nice to have a look at the temperature, because if the temperature goes way over, then you know that there's not enough cooling in there, your performance goes down, and that means that you're not getting the performance that you need. So I've opted for the NZXT of the Kraken, so it's the KRZ, I think it is, 73. And it's got the little readout on there, and it's really nice and sleek. Their fans are not too bad, not too loud, but this case also fits a 360, and you might as well look at a 360 for the airflow that you need to obviously dissipate heat and that. Is it worth So, is it worth to upgrade from 2060 to a Super? Not really. Well, it's still going to get performance. Not really. Not compared to what we've got out there right now. Silent, would the Lianli 215 not be a better value case if the airflow is priority? That's true, but think about it like this. The more airflow, this is what no one really talks about. The more airflow that you got through the case, the more dust it creates as well. And that means more cleaning. And more cleaning can mean more problems going on inside the computer. If you have like a sort of balanced and well ventilated case that's actually big enough, then you don't have to worry about it too much, as long as it's blowing over the graphics card, MOSFETs, phases, chokes, and heat spreaders, and a little bit over the AIO can keep that cooler, because in the reservoir it still needs to be cool inside. It does help, but it does depend on how you actually set the fan curves as well, because it depends on what fans you're using as well. But let's just move on with that. It gets really complicated. But at the moment, this is kind of like what everyone's looking for. So I'm just trying to just put a nice PC together that actually makes sense as well. I know, like, obviously with airflow, it does make more sense to have that. But then your computer doesn't last as long because it'll have more dust going in there. And then the dust will clutter over certain slots. So say that you had like two sticks that are 32 gigabytes of RAM, which no one does anyway. If they're going to do that, they'll populate 4 like DIMMs, but sometimes you get more performance, but it all depends. But what I'm saying is the dust will get into the computer more, and then it'll start, the performance is not going to be as great. Like at the end of the day, if you're going to spend a lot of money on a computer, you want it to be clean and still perform very well. So that's what we talk about, this sort of stuff. But anyway, so that's what I would go for. I would use that on Intel and AMD, because this should literally be okay for what we're using it for. So yeah, 1200 AM4, nice. Okay. And then I would use, if I didn't want to go down the AIO water cooling route, I would obviously go with NHD15 Noctua CPU air cooler. This case is really huge, so it can go in there and it can dissipate heat pretty well. It's got dual fans on there, nice copper pipes and stuff, and it's got 140mm fans on it, so it's going to be more quieter than the 120, and plus it's Noctua, and it's going to be definitely worth investing in a CPU air cooler at that price. Like £99.95, it's not so bad, but you don't have the CPU like heat readout or anything like that, but it's still it's like a little engine. It's like a chunk that goes on the CPU, and it'll be nice and cool. Plus you can use it on the AMD CPU or Intel CPU, no problems, and it shouldn't be too hard or difficult to put together. So that's what I would use on that. Now this is what we're talking about first, is the AMD build. So I would skip all the other Ryzen CPUs and go straight to the Ryzen 9 3950X. Only because it's got a boost clock and all that, and it's got 16 cores and 32 threads, and you're going to definitely need that in using it for content creation. Even for gaming, you're not going to be using that much unless you're streaming. Obviously, you're going to still take a little bit of the heat onto the graphics card. It would be nicer to have a dual system, but then I wouldn't say get the Ryzen 9 3950X. I would be saying get a 9900K or a 3900X. That's what I would use as starting off as a dual PC and stuff. But this is going to be really nice. 64 megabytes of L3 cache as well. It's going to be pretty decent. This CPU is it's an actual beast. It really is an actual beast. But the price is nearly enough, an extra £250 on top of the next CPU down, which is the Ryzen 9 3900 XT, I think. So this is not really going to be for overclocking, but you can overclock it if you want to, so you can kind of do it for the future. But the memory is saying it's 3200 to 3600. I've gone with 3200 because you really want to have no problems whatsoever, and it just makes more sense. So then I'm going to move on, and I will go for the MSI 5700. 570, sorry, Tomahawk Wi-Fi motherboard. So this is quite a nice little addition. I think on the AMD version you get obviously Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. I think this has got Wi-Fi 6, can't remember. Yeah, it has. It's got Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.0. Now if I look at the ports real quick, now for content creation, this will be quite good, even if you're a gamer in that. The two top parts here. So even at the top here, you got a flash BIOS. So if you're literally working for someone and working from at home, this makes more sense that you can literally, if you're a bit savvy and stuff, if you've got a problem, you can reset the BIOS if you've been playing around, because obviously you might want the fan cursor to be a little bit quieter. You want a little bit more performance, so you're turning everything up, so everything's up. That means it's going to be running hotter, but then you can go into the BIOS and just literally press that button without really getting your hands too dirty on it as well. And also if you've got a problem as well when you really need to get that task done, because sometimes the USB bus can go wrong and then you have to use like a keyboard, old school S2 and S1 connector, which is proper old. Stick it in the back there, nice little addition. But what I was going to say as well, you got two USB 2s on the back, so you got one for keyboard and one for mouse, and regardless of whether it's like a mouse like this is a super very fast Wi-Fi mouse that's about 200 quid. It's really good. You can just plug it in and still get the RGBs off of it, still get no latency and stuff. It's really quite decent. Then you can put your keyboard in and you'll be kind of fine, or you can put in like a color pad and stuff like that and use it for that if you want. But also you've got the connectors as well for Bluetooth 5.0, Wi-Fi 6, so it comes on the board, so you don't need to really use Ethernet cable, so that's pretty cool. Then you've got two USB 3s, which is normally quite standard, so I would use that for like something that needs USB 3. Maybe I might use it for my Stream Deck. Got a microphone, so Stream Deck microphone. So you've got a keyboard and mouse, Stream Deck microphone, maybe Go XLR. You can plug your phone in via Type-C or USB, depending if you've got Apple or whatever. And then you've got two other ports left, and you can use that really fast USB 3. 0.2, and you can use that for like memory cards or something. If you're using like cards, you're filming something, you're connecting it all together by doing your editing, you can use that. Or even a secondary spot, so like one of these little well, basically a little hard drive, but it's really fast, ridiculously fast. You can use one of them. Then obviously you got your normal audio out. That's nothing to complain about. 2.5 gigahertz infinite port. Connect it up, no problem whatsoever. The flash BIOS button is to update the BIOS without the CPU installed in the motherboard, if I remember correctly. Yeah, flash BIOS is for that as well, but sometimes you can get a button that does one button and it can actually clear the BIOS at the same time. Mind you though, it doesn't say that there's a clear CMOS button on there, so I'm guessing you have to take the battery out. Now where would the battery be on this motherboard? So if you put that fat graphics card on there, you could still probably get to it, so that's probably why it hasn't got it. But yeah, sometimes you can have a button and it does the same thing all in one. This is what they're trying to do. So a bit like the new cases that are coming out. You used to have a 3.5mm jack and a microphone 3.5mm jack, and now they've incorporated it into one. As long as you've got enough bars on the actual 3.5mm jack, then obviously it can do audio and audio and mic at the same time. But yeah, that's what I would go for. This motherboard's not too expensive. It's $209.99. I would go from this and upgrade if I really wanted to. But it's you can go obviously from megahertz. You can go to 3200 megahertz and also up to 3600 megahertz. Sweet spot would be 3200 if I was using this for content creation to make sure nothing went wrong. And then I would use Team Group Edition 32 gigabytes of RAM. And the reason why I would do that is obviously if you can populate 4, that would be better. But in some eyes, two memory slots, 2 memory sticks could actually run faster for better performance. But the reason I chose this, even though it's $194.99 for 32 gigabytes at 3200, you're probably thinking, wow, that's well expensive. But the reason I've chosen this is because of the case timings. So the timings of this is like 14 by 14 by 14 by 31. And then as soon as you put it into this motherboard through for XMP for its profile to make sure the RAM is running at its right speed. You can literally overclock that memory without needing to like push it too far. It's also running on Samsung B die, which is one of the best in the world of NAND flash, other than ECC memory. Obviously that's going to be a lot better as a workstation, but for people that are just coming over, just want to be in between the gaming community and using those cards, the pro graphics cards. I can never remember what they're called, but yeah, those cards you like right in the middle, because obviously we're talking about RTX 3090 right now. So this is why I would go with that, because that make more sense, and it will be the closest to ECC being more stable, because ECC is like a proper workstation horse of memory, and it just, you normally don't really have any problems with it. Then I would go with the RTX 3090. Now this seems like a pretty decent graphics card. MSI do decent graphics cards. This one seems to be quite fast as well. The Gaming X Trio 24 gig seems to be pretty tasty, and the reason is because it's got it's just a little bit slightly overclocked and stuff like that. They probably might bring out another one, not too sure, but this would be the next graphics card that I would use if I couldn't get Nvidia's Founders Edition. I would go with this graphics card. It's an absolute beast. I've had plenty of MSI Gaming Trio X graphics cards. I've even used them in normal like pre-built computers and stuff like that, and they do literally kick ass. They are really good. Anyway, I'll also move on as well, because if I'm using that motherboard for AMD, we don't want to have no bottlenecks. So what I would use is a Patriot PCI-4 NVMe. Now this is okay for the speed. We're looking at 5,000 megabytes reads and writes is 4,400 megabytes. But I'll obviously need to test this to see if it will actually run at that speed. But if you've got everything normally well balanced, you can normally get that speed, but you can also dial it back if you put it in the wrong slot as well. So that motherboard supports this really well, and that's what I would go with, but it's still pretty expensive. I wouldn't go with one, I would go with two. I would go with one where I could use it as a boot drive and put all my drivers and plugins and anything that customers and whatever, if I want a game, I could put it on there and I've got enough space. I wouldn't put a 500 gig there, and then I would use the secondary one as for like editing photos and maybe mucking about with Photoshop, and obviously for video editing as for a little bit of cash as well on the side, because technically like content creation programs run slightly different to what you think. Because if you think of Photoshop, you just think of storage. You think of storage, and technically storage is like pretty like obvious what you need for obviously Photoshop, but Photoshop also needs it and utilizes it as memory as well. So when you get to say 950 gigabytes, then it starts to go slower, and you think, why would it go slower? I've got enough memory, I've got enough this, but it needs that extra speed at the end. So that's what that does. So I still need to test that out. And then if I was also going to be using it as a starter, I would go for this power supply, because this power supply is made by Seasonic, if I remember rightly, which is ASUS 4 ROG version. And I've got this power supply and I know how solid it is. I've gone pretty nuts and overclocked pretty nuts, and it's pretty like cool. Let me just read a few comments before I go on to the next one, which will be Intel. What is it? The flash BIOS buttons. Right, remember that. Tasty of Hay. I sat outside Micro Center with my friend for 11 hours and only managed to be the 19th in line, and they only had 11 3090 cards. What? You are nuts. You are nuts. But I praise you for that. Jesus. But did you not get the graphics card at all then? Hang on. So you were 19th line and only had 11. Did you get the graphics card at all? No, you probably didn't actually, did you? If you were 11. Silent. If the same layout as an X470 Gaming Plus Max, it should have a clear CMOS button near the bottom of the board. Yeah, true say. Depends though what kind of board it is. The cache latency is arguable, as 3600 kit to CL18 will still be the superior kit over 3200 CL14 kit. Yeah, but I've picked this out because I'm not going completely on an overclocking like level where I want the best NAND flash of everything. I'm just picking this out as the most stable because people will go for the cheapest memory because it will say 3200. Yeah, it will still do its wonders, but the other person that's got better latency, it's going to obviously have more performance, and this is all about time is money, but not too much. It's kind of an average, like, explain to people what they should have. But anyway, I would go with this power supply. Also has a readout, a digital readout as well of how much power you're using. But it's not too complicated. Obviously, I want a complicated one actually made. Hopefully, they actually do that. Hello, how you doing? Might get the 980 Pro. It's all good. It's all good. Right, so I'd go with that. So that's all for AMD. Now, if I was going for Intel, I would go with the 10900K. It's the fastest CPU, but also the fastest gaming CPU. It has 10 cores and 20 threads. No, it ain't. It's got, how many cores has this got? It's got a lot more than that. It's got, has it got 10 cores and 20 threads? I can't remember. Let me have a quick look. Oh yeah, it has. It's got 10 cores, 20 threads. This is the fastest one for gaming, but it's also the newest one. But if you can overclock a little bit, you can get slightly better speeds. But technically, I shouldn't really be saying overclocking, because if you overclock this, then it means that your content creation is going to be unstable. So I won't talk about overclocking, but it does have a boost clock as well. Maybe you can, no, I wasn't even going to say that. Go into the motherboard and then press the, no, don't do that. Do everything, excuse me, do everything the proper way. Anyway, that's what I would go for. This is obviously the best gaming CPU, but it's still just about powerful enough. It's not as powerful as a 3950X, but it's the most powerfulest gaming computer content creation, because the reason I also say this is because people will be buying an RTX 3080, and I still would say I'd offer them this, the 10900K, but this is RTX 3090, which is still going over the content creation professional line, but you can still game with it, but you only get that small FPS, and it's not really like the ideal thing for that, but it's still the best gaming graphics, the best CPU for gaming right now, and also the price is better than what it is for the 3950X, but the 3950X has got silly amount of cores and threads, so I would go with that. And then I would go with this motherboard, which is a Mag Z470 Tomahawk. So this is what I would use as an entry level. Looks okay, not too bad. It's not the best looking motherboard, but when it's in that case, all black and that, and all your stuff is on there, it's gonna look all right. This one's only got 8-pin EPS and 4-pin EPS at the top, so the power delivery is just kind of the norm. It's nothing really to shout out about. The heat sinks don't look the absolute best. Yeah. But on the back, the reason why I chose this doesn't have a CMOS reset button or even a flash BIOS button on the back, but it has got 2 USBs on the back at the top, and you've got a display port, HDMI port, Type-C to plug in your phone depending on what phone you've got, also USB 3.1 and then 4 USBs. Then you've got the option of having faster speed. Now this would be good for content creation because you can put it in a faster network, or you can have them as a dual network, but you can put it in the fast one network, and then you can use Adobe and clouds and stuff and download all your information and then work straight from it. That's where this might be a little bit different from obviously the AMD one. There's the pros and cons of having AMD, and there's the pros and cons of having the Intel version. But this is kind of like still going to be very expensive, but the starting price. Didn't want to scare anyone off too much. And plus it's all the newest components that you should have, really, so you don't really have a bottleneck. But technically it's arguable. So this is what I would have there. Then I would go with the crucial NVMe PCI 3, because obviously there's no PCI 4 in Intel, so I would go with that. And I use the P5 Crucial because Crucial work with Micron, or owned by Micron, I can't remember, but their NAND flash is actually superb. It's good. It's a good, like Toshiba's NAND flash is pretty decent as well, as long as they're not lying. But I've tested these plenty of times. They last a very long time, pretty decent, and it's all good. And this one goes at 3,400 reads and 3,000 writes. So it's not too bad. It's actually pretty decent for that motherboard. So that's what I would go with. And I think I'll come to the end of it. But so if I was going to use that for Intel, then obviously I would use that. I would use this case because it's really big, and you got to think you got to have a big case, or find another like full tower case. Super tower is probably too big, but full tower is still big, but it's big enough for that graphics card. And then obviously using a 360 AIO for either the Intel or the AMD 3950X. Then obviously using a CPU air cooler. It's big enough to obviously cool the CPU, and it works with both, and it's easy put together. 140mm fans, no problem whatsoever. And then I would use, I think, did I do the memory as well? There was a memory, I don't think I've done the memory. Right, there's a memory that I would use as well with the latency as well, but I would use 4,000 megahertz for the Intel one. Obviously 3,200 for the AMD one. That's what I would do. Anyone got any questions before I go? And how's everyone doing? Is everyone doing really good? Do you think this is good? Would you actually be purchasing this? Even though it does look pretty expensive just on this list, what I'm looking at right now. Oh, I don't think I did put it on there actually. Oh yeah, I did. There we go. So 3,200 for the AMD, and I would populate 4 for the Intel because that works pretty nicely. Populating all the spots for it. It's like £259. To be honest with you, I'm going to leave all the links in the description down below, and then you can kind of work out what the price is going to be, because every time I try and put the price in it, it puts them and bundles it all together. If I use another screen, I could have probably done that through Internet Explorer, then obviously Google, that would have made sense, wouldn't it? But yeah, that's it. That's what I would use. 850 watts will solve your problem as well. For any having problems with RTX 3080, and RTX 3090 should be okay at the moment. But also dialing back, so the pros and cons as well with the AMD is that it's got PCI-4, but with Intel you can get faster memory, which some software like Adobe and stuff like that works more faster and more efficient. It depends on how the developers have worked with obviously the other developers that developed the CPU or graphics card or memory, whatever, and that's how it works like really well. So what I would do is I don't know, the AMD seems to be more of a content creation, and the Intel one is more of a like top gaming one. But if you start looking at the Intel more higher end CPUs, then it gets real expensive real quickly. So this is why I've come up with this, but it's still pretty expensive. But I would use nothing less than 850 watts and everything that I've got up there. And then you can obviously just change from the motherboards. That motherboard is pretty sufficient for enough ports to be able to plug everything in. But anyway, thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, like, share. We don't need to share. Like and comment down below and tell me what you think and what you're looking for in a PC, especially if you get the RTX 3090 or RTX 3080 when it comes. Right, thanks for watching. Roger and out.